Rain was falling steadily on the quiet suburban streets of Decatur, Georgia. At exactly 9:47 p.m., a scream shattered the calm, a sharp, desperate sound that lingered in the air longer than it should have. Neighbors later said they heard pounding on a front door. Then, silence. No one opened their curtains. No one stepped outside. They just waited. When police arrived at the modest two-story home on Glendale Avenue, they found a scene that would leave even the most seasoned officers unsettled. In the backyard, lit by the flickering porch light, lay the body of a teenage boy. His phone was still in his hand, screen glowing with a single unsent message. She lied to all of us. Inside the house, signs of a struggle. Overturned chairs, shattered glass, and the lingering scent of vanilla perfume mixed with the iron tang of blood. No signs of forced entry, no sign of Camille Rose. To the outside world, she was an award-winning literature teacher. But that night, everything changed. What began as mentorship had unraveled into something darker. 3 students, one forbidden relationship, and a truth so twisted it would rip an entire community apart. And this was only the beginning. If you love true stories that reveal dark secrets and unexpected turns, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell. Every week, a new case that will grip you from start to finish. Don't miss the next one. It could be even more disturbing than this one. Camille Rose had always been the kind of teacher students remembered. At 34, she had an elegant presence, calm voice, sharp eyes, and an aura that blended authority with warmth. She taught American literature at Central High School, and her classroom was the only place where even the most restless students sat still. To them, she was brilliant, inspiring, someone who actually listened. At home, though, Camille was fading. She lived in a quiet neighborhood with her husband, Daniel Rose, a long-haul truck driver who was often gone for weeks at a time. Their marriage had started with promise, college sweethearts, dreams of traveling, late-night wine on balconies. But life got loud, and love got quiet. Now, when Daniel called, their conversations were brief and transactional. Did you feed the dog? Did the water bill come? He hadn't touched her with affection in over a year. Camille filled the silence with books. She had always been a romantic, but lately, even fiction couldn't save her from the hollowness. She would stay late at school, pretending to catch up on grading, just to avoid the silence of their dimly lit home. Her once vibrant eyes dulled with each passing day. Her students gave her something her husband no longer did: attention, and even more dangerously, admiration. She wasn't naive. She knew the boundaries. But when 17-year-old Kevin Sanders, her star pupil and captain of the basketball team, started asking her questions about poetry after class, she didn't stop him. He was confident, charming, and made her laugh in a way Daniel hadn't in years. Then there was Malik Johnson, loud, confident, and deeply insecure. He'd stay after school under the guise of needing help with writing assignments, his compliments layered under jokes, his glances lingering too long. Camille knew the attention was wrong, but it was also addictive. And finally, there was Ethan Rivera, quiet, intellectual, kind. He would stay just to talk about books. He never flirted, never touched her. But with Ethan, Camille felt seen in a way she hadn't in a very long time. Their conversations weren't laced with tension, but with understanding. He made her feel smart again, valuable. Each boy gave her something she thought she'd lost. Kevin gave her fun. Malik gave her power. Ethan gave her peace. She told herself it was innocent, that she was just helping them. But deep down, Camille knew the truth. She was filling a void, taking from them what life had taken from her. And what she didn't see coming, what none of them saw, was how fragile that illusion was, how easily admiration could turn into obsession, how secrets, when buried together, don't stay buried for long. Camille Rose hadn't set out to destroy her life, at least not consciously. In her mind, she was just trying to feel something, anything, again. After a decade of marriage that had withered into silence and routine, she was desperate to remember who she had once been. before the loneliness, before the numbness, before every morning felt like dragging herself through fog. She wanted to feel alive again. It started with Kevin Sanders. Kevin was one of those students teachers remembered long after graduation. Bright smile, quick wit, magnetic personality. He was the kind of boy who made the hallways come alive when he walked through them. In class, he wasn't the best student, but he tried. And he noticed Camille, not just as a teacher, but as a woman. It was during a tutoring session that things shifted. Camille stayed late to help Kevin prep for an upcoming exam. He showed up with no books, but brought his signature charm. He joked about her being the only reason he came to class. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. And when he said, "You should smile more, Ms. Rose. You're beautiful when you do," something inside her cracked. She didn't scold him. She didn't shut it down. Instead, she smiled. From that moment on, tutoring became their ritual. They met twice a week after school in her classroom, always alone. What started as academic help morphed into long conversations about life, his future, her past. He started opening up about his fears, college, pressure, his absentee father. Camille listened like no one else had, and he clung to that attention. She told herself it was mentorship, that she was helping him, that it wasn't personal. But it was. Camille began dressing differently on the days she knew she'd see him. She wore the perfume Daniel once said reminded him of when they first met. She fixed her hair, added color to her lips. Small things. Harmless, she told herself. Then Kevin kissed her. She didn't stop him. It was clumsy, reckless, wrong, and electric. In that instant, every line blurred. Camille became someone else, someone bold, desired, dangerous. The kiss broke her world open. She was no longer just a teacher or a wife. She was alive, and she wanted more. But Kevin wasn't the only one watching her. Malik Johnson had noticed the change. He was always loud, always laughing. But lately his eyes lingered too long. He started showing up after class, offering to help her carry things, pretending to need help with papers he hadn't even started. At first, Camille brushed it off, until the day she and Kevin were in her classroom and Malik walked in unannounced. The look on his face said everything. He knew. After that, Malik became bolder. He flirted openly, challenged Kevin with thinly veiled jabs in class. He wanted Camille's attention, and he wasn't subtle about it. One afternoon, when Camille tried to dismiss him after class, he stepped in close and said, "Don't act like you don't see me too." She felt trapped. Her mind screamed no, but her body froze. When he kissed her, it was rough, urgent, and she didn't push him away. The guilt came later. Camille told herself it was a mistake, that it would stop, that she was still in control. But then came Ethan Rivera. Ethan wasn't like the others. He didn't flirt. He didn't seek attention. He stayed behind after class because he genuinely wanted to talk about literature. He'd sit across from her, leaning forward, listening, like her words mattered. He asked questions about books, about life, about dreams. Camille found herself opening up to him more than she ever had with Daniel. Their connection was deeper, slower, safer. One rainy afternoon, after they'd spent an hour discussing a novel about forbidden love, he touched her hand. Not by accident. She didn't pull away. Their kiss was soft, unsure, and entirely different. With Kevin, she felt thrill. With Malik, danger. But with Ethan, she felt known. By now, Camille's life had become a house of cards. One breath, one slip, and it would all collapse, but she couldn't stop. The attention, the desire, the feeling of being wanted again, it had become her oxygen. She was no longer surviving. She was flying. And she had no idea how far the fall would be. For a while, Camille convinced herself that she had everything under control, that the lines she crossed could be walked back, that what she had with Kevin, Malik, and Ethan existed in separate worlds, compartments neatly sealed away from each other. She was careful enough to stagger meetings, delete messages, avoid unnecessary attention. But control was an illusion. And illusions always break. The first crack came from Kevin. Once light-hearted and flirtatious, he began to change. He became possessive, jealous in ways that felt dangerous. When Camille cancelled a tutoring session because of a faculty meeting, Kevin appeared outside the staff lounge, waiting. His smile was gone. "You're avoiding me," he said, eyes sharp, voice low. Camille tried to diffuse the tension, explaining it was nothing personal, but Kevin didn't buy it. "You're seeing someone else," he muttered, and walked away before she could answer. That was the first time Camille felt fear. Not just guilt, but actual fear. Kevin had always been charming, but there was an intensity building behind his eyes that she hadn't seen before. Then Malik started acting out. He became unpredictable, showing up at odd times, texting late at night, demanding to see her. He hated being ignored. When Camille stopped responding to his messages, he began confronting her at school, in hallways, in the parking lot, once even during class, under the pretense of needing help with a project. His tone had shifted from playful to accusing, and the glint in his eye was no longer amusement, it was challenge. One afternoon, Camille found a note slipped into her desk drawer. "Don't forget who saw you first." It wasn't signed, but she didn't need a signature. She knew who it was from. Now every knock on her classroom door made her heart race, and then, quietly, Ethan started to pull away. He became withdrawn, distracted. During their once cherished talks, he'd stare out the window, speak in half sentences. Camille asked if something was wrong. He shrugged. "Just tired," he'd say. But Camille could sense the shift, and worse, she saw suspicion in his eyes. He was putting pieces together. The walls were closing in. At night, Camille would wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, convinced someone was watching her. She began checking her locks twice, then 3 times. Her husband, Daniel, noticed her anxiety. "You're working too much," he said one evening. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She had. 3 of them. In the staff bathroom one day, Camille overheard 2 students whispering. "I think Kevin and Malik are gonna fight," one said. Over Ms. Rose, her blood went cold. She confronted Kevin after school, hoping to calm him down, to warn him that things were getting out of hand. Instead, he cornered her behind the bleachers and whispered, "Tell me you're not with anyone else. I need to hear you say it." Camille froze. She lied. She said, "There's no one else." But Kevin didn't believe her, and neither did Malik or Ethan. Each boy, in their own way, began unraveling. Camille could feel it in the way they looked at her, no longer with affection, but with suspicion, hurt, betrayal. She had tried to fill her emptiness with pieces of them, but now those pieces were sharp, jagged, cutting her from the inside. Then came the messages. Anonymous, cryptic, tick-tock. "You think you're safe? You can't hide from the truth." Her phone buzzed at all hours. She changed her number. It didn't stop. Her classroom was vandalized one morning, just a broken window, nothing stolen, but it was enough. Enough to make her realize she was being watched. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Paranoia consumed her. What had started as control was now chaos. The boys were talking. The secret was slipping through her fingers like water. And with every passing day, Camille felt the ground beneath her crack just a little more. She had built a life on desire. Now desire was turning against her, and the worst part, she knew it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. It was a Thursday, cloudy, unseasonably cold for early spring. Camille hadn't slept the night before. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, and her thoughts spun like a carousel she couldn't get off. Something had changed. Something was coming. She felt it in the way students stared a little too long, the way colleagues offered tight, polite smiles but asked no questions. Rumors had started to seep through the cracks. Whispers in the hallway. Strange looks in the teacher's lounge. Someone had talked. She just didn't know who. That morning, Principal Howard Green asked to see her in his office. His tone was casual, but Camille's heart raced the entire walk there. He gestured for her to sit. "We've received some Concerning comments, he began, choosing his words like landmines, about inappropriate behavior with students. Her blood ran cold. He didn't name names, he didn't have to. Camille denied everything, calmly, professionally. I treat all my students equally, she said. I've never crossed a line. Principal Green nodded, not entirely convinced, and told her to take the rest of the day off, just to be safe. It wasn't a suspension, not officially, but it felt like one. When she walked out of the school building, Kevin was standing at the edge of the parking lot, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable. Behind him, Malik leaned against the bleachers. Camille felt her stomach twist. They knew, and worse, they had started turning on each other. That evening, it all unraveled. Around 7:20 p.m., Camille was home, curled on her couch, trying to calm the storm in her chest. Her husband, Daniel, was still on the road, days from returning. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the television. Then came the knock, 3 short, sharp hits. Camille hesitated. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly she approached the door and peeked through the curtain. Kevin. She opened it a crack. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "I need to talk," he said, eyes desperate. "Please." Against her better judgment, she let him in. He paced the living room, agitated, running his hands through his hair. "They're going to ruin you," he said. "Malik's telling people. He's saying everything. And Ethan, I think he knows too." Camille tried to stay calm. "Kevin, we need to stop this, all of it." But Kevin wasn't listening. His words became erratic, his tone unstable. "I loved you," he muttered. "I was the first. You said it meant something." Before Camille could respond, another knock rattled the door. She froze. Kevin turned pale. This time it was Malik. "What the hell is he doing here?" he shouted the moment she opened the door. He pushed past her and squared off with Kevin. They were yelling within seconds, accusations flying like knives. "She told me I was the only one." "She lied to you, just like she lied to me." Camille tried to separate them, stepping between their bodies, but the tension was nuclear. She screamed for them to stop, but neither listened. Then, from the front window, she saw movement outside. Ethan. He stood in the shadows of the porch, watching. His face was unreadable, still, like a statue. He opened the door slowly and stepped inside without a word. The shouting stopped. All 3 boys were now in the same room. Camille's breathing turned shallow. Ethan looked at her, then at Kevin, then at Malik. And then he said quietly, "You used all of us." The silence that followed was heavier than the shouting. Camille whispered, "You don't understand." "I understand more than you think," Ethan interrupted. "I saw everything." He pulled out his phone. A video played, a grainy clip. Camille kissing Kevin in her classroom. Another, of her with Malik. The final one, a recording of a conversation between her and Ethan just days before, when she'd whispered she wished things were different. Camille's knees buckled. She'd been found out, not just by rumor, not by hearsay, by proof. The room exploded again. Kevin lunged toward Ethan. Malik shoved him back. A struggle broke out. Camille screamed, tried to break them apart, but someone hit the table. A lamp crashed to the ground. A glass shattered. In the chaos, Ethan stumbled backwards, hit his head on the corner of a cabinet. He didn't move. Everyone froze. Blood pooled slowly beneath his temple. Kevin took a step back, hand shaking. Malik stared in horror. Camille dropped to her knees. "Call 911!" she shouted. Kevin ran. Malik followed. Camille stayed. She cradled Ethan's head, whispered his name, begged him to wake up. But his eyes were open, unblinking. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, Camille was still on the floor, covered in blood, rocking back and forth. She never saw the flashing lights. She never heard the siren. All she could hear was Ethan's voice, echoing in her mind. "You used all of us." The morning after Ethan Rivera's death, Decatur was a town in shock. The headlines were brutal. "Beloved teacher at center of student scandal. Teen dies in violent altercation linked to affair allegations." News vans lined the street outside Camille Rose's house, before sunrise. Neighbors stood on their lawns, whispering, filming, speculating. Central High School was closed for the day. Grief counselors were called in. But no one could process what had actually happened because no one understood how it got this far. Ethan's parents were the first to speak publicly. His mother stood outside their modest home, clutching his senior portrait, her voice cracking as she told reporters he was quiet, kind, brilliant, he never got into trouble. He didn't deserve this. The community mourned with her, but murmurs of blame floated through every conversation. Whispers about the inappropriate relationship Camille had with her students turned into full-blown accusations. At school, students were confused and scared. Rumors flew down hallways faster than facts. Some said Camille had seduced Ethan. Others said the boys were the ones who pursued her. Some blamed the administration for failing to protect their classmates. Others blamed Camille alone. Principal Green held a press conference, visibly shaken. "We are cooperating fully with law enforcement," he said, "and we're committed to ensuring nothing like this ever happens again." But trust had already been shattered. Inside the police station, Camille sat in an interrogation room for nearly 6 hours. Her lawyer beside her, she stared at the table, hands trembling. She had been read her rights. She hadn't been charged, not yet. But the detectives made it clear. This wasn't going away. Detective Laura Barnes, known for her bluntness and precision, led the questioning. "Ms. Rose," she began, "how many students were you involved with?" Camille didn't answer. "Did you know they were aware of each other?" Still silence. Barnes leaned in. "Did you ever think about how this could end?" That question stuck. Because the truth was, Camille hadn't thought about how it would end. She had only thought about how it made her feel seen, wanted, alive. But now her world was collapsing. Her marriage was over. Daniel didn't even call. Her reputation was obliterated, and Ethan was gone. The guilt was unbearable. Back at school, Kevin and Malik were both questioned and temporarily suspended. Their names had leaked online, and within hours, their social media accounts were flooded with threats, hate messages, and sympathy from those who believed they'd been manipulated. Their parents hired attorneys. Their futures were uncertain. College offers were withdrawn. Friends disappeared. Malik stopped showing up to school events. Kevin, once the life of the halls, now walked with his head down. They were no longer the popular boys. They were pariahs. Ethan's funeral was held a week later. Hundreds showed up, students, teachers, reporters. Camille wasn't allowed within 50 feet of the church. She watched the live stream from a small TV in the county holding facility. She wore a grey jumpsuit and listened as Ethan's older brother delivered a eulogy that made the room fall silent. He wanted to be a writer, he said. He loved stories. But the story of his life was stolen from him. Camille sobbed. In private, the school board met to discuss policies, security, oversight. How had no one seen the signs? Why hadn't anyone come forward sooner? Teachers were retrained, students were interviewed. The community demanded accountability, but the damage had already been done. Camille was placed on unpaid administrative leave. A formal investigation into her conduct began immediately. Her colleagues, once friendly and supportive, now avoided her name. She was erased, removed from class rosters, scrubbed from faculty pages. Her home was vandalized twice. Windows shattered. The words monster and predator spray-painted across her garage. She stopped answering the door, stopped turning on the lights. She lived in shadows, haunted by everything she couldn't undo. The most painful part was knowing that Ethan had believed in her. He had trusted her. Their connection had been different. She hadn't meant to hurt him, but her actions had blurred every line until nothing made sense anymore. Not to her, not to them, not to anyone. Detective Barnes told the media, "This is one of the most disturbing cases I've encountered. It's not just about inappropriate relationships, it's about power, manipulation, and consequence. And consequence had come for everyone. For Ethan's family, a son buried far too young. For Kevin and Malik, reputations destroyed, futures stolen. For Camille, a career in ashes, a life in ruins. And for the town of Decatur, a painful reminder that even the most trusted faces can harbor the darkest secrets. That winter, the school installed security cameras in every hallway. A new policy was passed, banning one-on-one tutoring without another staff member present. But none of it brought Ethan back. None of it erased the trauma etched into the lives of those left behind. Camille Rose had once been a symbol of success, intellect, and grace. Now, she was the face of scandal, and as the first snow fell on a grieving town, no one could quite say where the blame ended, or if healing would ever begin. If this story has made you think or feel something, leave a like and comment below. Your opinion matters, and maybe someone reading your thoughts also needs to understand that some truths hurt, but need to be said. Let's talk about it together. 2 weeks after Ethan Rivera's funeral, the media storm had calmed, but the investigation hadn't. Detective Laura Barnes, determined to uncover every layer of the truth, continued her methodical pursuit. The public believed Camille Rose was the puppet master, the manipulator, the predator. But something didn't sit right with Barnes. It was too clean, too convenient. And then something surfaced that no one expected. It began with a laptop. Ethan's parents, sorting through their son's belongings, found his school-issued computer hidden beneath a pile of books. They turned it over to the police, hoping it might contain clues about his state of mind in the weeks leading up to his death. What they didn't know was that Ethan had been keeping records, files, audio clips, even screen recordings. He'd documented everything. Detective Barnes and her team combed through the contents. What they discovered reshaped the entire narrative. The first recording was from a phone call between Ethan and Camille. Calm, respectful, nothing overtly inappropriate. But the tone was intimate. The way she spoke to him, soft, confiding, warm, was unlike anything a teacher should say to a student. But the real shock came from Ethan's notes. He had written long journal-style entries about his interactions with Camille, some romantic, some confused, many conflicted. But he never painted her as a manipulator. In fact, Ethan often questioned if he was the one taking advantage of her vulnerability. And then the second bomb dropped. Ethan had also recorded a video diary the night before his death. In it, he sits on his bed, face pale, voice shaking. "I don't know what to do anymore," he says into the camera. "I thought I understood her, but I think I was wrong. She's not just seeing me. Kevin, Malik, there's something happening between all of us, and it's getting dangerous. I don't think she knows how far it's gone. I don't think any of us do." He pauses, then adds, almost whispering, "If something happens to me, I need someone to know. I was trying to stop it." Detective Barnes froze the frame. This wasn't the voice of a boy who had been groomed. It was the voice of someone caught in a web of emotional chaos, trying to navigate something far more complex than anyone had realized. Ethan hadn't been manipulated into silence. He had chosen to keep quiet because he cared for Camille and, in his own way, wanted to protect her. But the final piece that shifted everything came from an unexpected source, Vanessa Hart, a local journalist with a reputation for digging deeper than the headlines. Vanessa had followed the story since day one. When she learned about the recordings, she reached out to Barnes, requesting access. Barnes refused at first, but Vanessa didn't back down. She'd already uncovered something of her own. A security camera from a gas station near Camille's house captured a figure the night of the incident, someone running from the direction of the Rose residence at 9:58 p.m. It wasn't Kevin, and it wasn't Malik. It was a fourth student, Tyrell Owens, an under-the-radar junior, quiet, academically gifted, no known connection to Camille. But he and Ethan had been close friends. Vanessa found a post on Tyrell's private blog, deleted but archived, that hinted at deep resentment. "She gave Ethan everything. I was invisible." Barnes pulled school records. Tyrell had once been tutored by Camille, long before Ethan, Kevin, or Malik. There had never been a hint of anything inappropriate. But the connection was there, and so was motive. They brought Tyrell in for questioning. He denied being near the house that night until he saw the footage. He cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I just wanted her to see me. I knew Ethan was going to confront her, and I wanted to stop it. I wanted to be there. But when I got there, they were all fighting. I panicked. I ran." He hadn't touched Ethan, but he'd been there, and he hadn't told anyone. Barnes now had 4 boys, 1 teacher, and a story far more tangled than she'd ever imagined. The narrative was no longer black and white. Camille hadn't just seduced her students. She had been emotionally unraveling, creating attachments she couldn't manage, forming connections that spun out of control. Some boys loved her. Some envied her. Some wanted to save her. Others wanted to punish her. And Ethan, he had tried to make sense of it all. He had tried to end it, but ended up paying the price. Detective Laura Barnes sat in her office long after sunset, replaying the video of Ethan Rivera one more time. Each word he spoke, each breath he took, painted a portrait of a young man burdened by secrets far too heavy for someone his age. She had started this case certain that Camille Rose was a predator. But now, that certainty had cracked, and Vanessa Hart wasn't letting the story go quiet either. The journalist released an article the next morning titled, "The Teacher, the Teen, and the Truth No One Wanted to See." It didn't defend Camille, but it didn't condemn her either. It asked questions, real ones. How does emotional vulnerability blur the lines between right and wrong? What happens when adult responsibility meets adolescent obsession? The article went viral. Some readers demanded Camille be locked away forever. Others began to see something different. A woman who made terrible, inexcusable choices, yes, but who had also been unraveling under the weight of her own emotional isolation. Vanessa received a flood of emails after the piece was published. One stood out. It came from Ms. Alicia Monroe, a retired school counselor who had worked with Camille early in her career. "I saw something in her years ago," the email read. "She was brilliant, but lonely. She didn't have boundaries, not because she was malicious, but because she was always searching for something. Attention, purpose, love maybe. No one ever stepped in." Barnes called Monroe that afternoon. Their conversation changed everything. Monroe had flagged Camille's interactions with students years earlier, not for physical misconduct, but for emotional overdependence. "She got too close," Monroe said. "She blurred the line between mentor and friend. I submitted reports. Nothing came of them." Those reports had vanished from Camille's personnel file. Barnes reopened Camille's school records. She discovered that Monroe was right. Camille had been quietly moved from one program to another more than once. Not as punishment, but to keep her under the radar. The administration had known something wasn't right, but they chose silence over scandal. That silence may have cost Ethan his life. Now Barnes wasn't just investigating Camille. She was investigating the institution that had protected her, enabled her, and ignored warnings until it was too late. Meanwhile, Camille sat in a holding cell, unaware of the shifts happening outside her walls. Her lawyer visited daily. At first, she refused to speak. She was ashamed, broken, exhausted. But as news trickled in about Tyrell Owens, about Ethan's recordings, about the missing reports, she began to understand something crucial. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every system that failed. Her marriage, her school, her supervisors, herself. Vanessa Hart requested an interview. Camille agreed. They met in a sterile, grey-walled interview room, cameras off, just a recorder and a quiet agreement to tell the truth. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Camille said, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't wake up one day and decide to destroy these boys. I was lost. I was empty. And I let them fill me." Vanessa asked, "Did you love them?" "I don't know," Camille answered. "I think I loved what they gave me, pieces of myself I thought were gone, but real love. No, it wasn't love. It was desperation. The interview became the centerpiece of Vanessa's next article, one that no longer read like an exposé, but like a tragedy with no heroes, only casualties. Simultaneously, a new player entered the stage, attorney Michael Langford, known for taking on cases against school boards in civil rights violations. He represented Ethan's family and announced a lawsuit not only against Camille, but against Central High School and the Decatur School District. This wasn't just one woman's failure, Langford said at a press conference. This was a systemic collapse of oversight, of ethics, of responsibility. The lawsuit forced the school to open its records. Internal memos revealed that multiple teachers had raised concerns about Camille's closeness to male students, particularly those struggling emotionally or academically. But the school feared scandal. They buried it. The public outcry was immediate. Town halls turned chaotic. Parents demanded answers. Students spoke out, some defending Camille's character, others recalling uncomfortable moments they had witnessed. It was messy, painful, real. Detective Barnes, once certain Camille would be convicted and forgotten, now led a case expanding far beyond one woman. Her report to the district attorney included not just Camille's actions, but the administration's years-long negligence. For the first time, Camille wasn't alone in the spotlight. The narrative was changing. People weren't excusing her, but they were beginning to understand her. And they were starting to see how many others had looked away, stayed silent, and let it all happen. Barnes recommended charges not only for Camille, but also disciplinary actions for several school officials. The DA agreed to pursue obstruction charges for tampering with personnel files. Camille Rose was still facing trial, but now she wasn't the only one. And as the first day of hearings approached, Decatur braced itself, because the truth had finally started to emerge, and no one would walk away unchanged. The courtroom was silent, except for the distant hum of a malfunctioning light and the shuffle of papers in the hands of lawyers. Camille Rose sat at the defense table, her wrists free, but her future still chained. It had been nearly 6 months since Ethan Rivera's death, and the trial had finally begun. The room was packed. Media, parents, former students. Everyone wanted a front-row seat to the collapse of a woman once seen as brilliant, kind, and completely untouchable. Camille looked older. Her once sleek hair was now dull and pulled back. Her clothes hung loosely, her cheeks sunken. But her eyes, once full of confusion and regret, were steady now. She was no longer hiding from the truth. She was walking directly into it. The prosecution wasted no time painting her as a predator. Assistant District Attorney Caroline Steele, sharp and methodical, detailed every inappropriate message, every clandestine meeting, every boundary crossed. Photos, texts, and testimony from Kevin and Malik formed the foundation of the case. Both young men sat stiffly on the witness stand, visibly uncomfortable, their words practiced, their tone conflicted. "She told me I was the only one," Kevin said, his voice breaking. "I believed her. She used us," Malik added, eyes downcast. "Made us feel special, then tossed us aside." Their testimonies landed hard. The jury watched Camille carefully, searching for signs of guilt or manipulation. But Camille didn't flinch. She listened. She let their pain land, because she knew it was real. But then it was the defense's turn. Camille's attorney, Rachel Whitaker, approached with a calm but commanding presence. She didn't deny the relationships. She didn't argue technicalities. Instead, she began with a question. Why does a woman, respected and accomplished, risk everything for a few moments of connection with her students? There was no objection, just silence. Whitaker introduced Ethan's recordings, specifically his final video. As it played in the courtroom, every person in the room sat still, absorbing the fear and sadness in his voice. "I don't think she meant to hurt us," Ethan said. "I think she's hurting too." It was the first moment the narrative shifted. Whitaker then called Camille to the stand. It was a risk, but a calculated one. Camille took a deep breath as she faced the jury. Her voice was steady, but soft. "I failed," she began. "As a teacher, as a mentor, as a human being. I crossed lines I never should have crossed. I confused my pain for love. I confused their attention for healing." She explained the loneliness, the broken marriage, the loss of identity. She admitted to enjoying the attention, to letting it spiral into something she couldn't control. But she never claimed innocence. She claimed responsibility. "I never wanted to hurt Ethan. I never wanted any of this. But that doesn't excuse what I allowed to happen." Whitaker asked her, "Were you in love with them?" Camille paused. "No, I was in love with being seen." For the first time, some jurors nodded, not in agreement but in understanding. The defense then shifted the focus to the school's failure. Reports from Alicia Munro were presented, along with proof that the administration had received multiple red flags over the years and chosen to ignore them. Principal Howard Green was subpoenaed and forced to testify. His answers were evasive. At one point, when asked why no one acted sooner, he simply said, "We didn't want to damage her career over suspicions." That answer hit the courtroom like a slap. Vanessa Hart, seated in the gallery, scribbled furiously. Her articles had already changed public perception, but now the system was on trial too. By the third day, new conversations had begun. Not just about Camille's guilt, but about institutional responsibility. Ethan's parents returned to the stand to speak about their son, not just as a victim, but as a person. His mother said, "He wanted to fix things. He wanted to help her. That's who he was." Camille wept openly during their testimony, but it wasn't performative. It was real. Her remorse filled the room like smoke, undeniable and inescapable. On the fifth day, the final witness was called Tyrell Owens. He told the court about the night of the incident, about how he had gone to Camille's house to confront her, to warn Ethan, to make himself visible. "I wanted her to notice me," he admitted. "But when I saw them fighting, I panicked. I ran. And I never told anyone because I was afraid no one would believe me." His voice cracked. "I think Ethan died trying to protect her." That sentence shifted something again. By the end of the week, the jury looked exhausted. They had heard every ugly truth, every blurred line, every missed warning. Camille Rose had destroyed lives, but she wasn't a monster. She was broken, she was human, and so were the boys. The closing arguments came on the sixth day. The prosecution demanded accountability. What she did was illegal. No matter her pain, no matter her past, adults do not cross lines with children. The defense asked for nuance. "We're not asking for absolution. We're asking for understanding, for context, for the truth in its entirety." Then came the deliberation. Hours passed, and then finally a verdict. Camille Rose was found guilty on 2 counts of inappropriate conduct with a minor, not guilty of contributing to the wrongful death of Ethan Rivera. The sentence, 4 years in prison, with parole eligibility after 2. She would be required to register as a sex offender and permanently surrender her teaching license. There was no applause, no outburst, just silence. And then Camille exhaled. For the first time in months, she could breathe. Not because she was free, but because the truth had been told. The verdict spread through Decatur like wildfire. Local news stations broke into programming with the announcement, "Camille Rose found guilty on 2 counts, acquitted on charges related to student death." Social media exploded. The town, already divided by months of speculation and pain, cracked even further. To some, the sentence was a slap on the wrist, a disgrace. 4 years for a woman who had blurred lines between teacher and student, who had lost control of her own boundaries, and in the process helped set off a chain of events that led to a boy's death. Unacceptable, they said. To others, it was merciful. They saw the trial, they saw the testimony, and they saw Camille not as a predator in the dark, but as a woman who had been drowning quietly in plain sight. Her actions were wrong, devastatingly wrong, but they were born of pain, not evil. For them, the sentence was justice tempered with understanding. But the ripple effects didn't stop at the courthouse steps. At Central High School, new policies were rolled out immediately. One-on-one sessions between staff and students were now only allowed in the presence of another faculty member. Every classroom received a security camera. Teachers were required to take annual training on boundaries and ethics. Students were encouraged to report anything that made them uncomfortable. Anonymous tip boxes were installed across the campus. Principal Howard Green resigned within a week of the verdict. Though he avoided criminal charges, his legacy was in shambles. During a final, quiet staff meeting, he admitted what most already knew. "I should have done more. I didn't, and that will follow me for the rest of my life." The students affected directly, Kevin, Malik, and Tyrell, each tried to return to something resembling normal. Kevin left the state. His parents enrolled him in a private academy several counties away. He no longer spoke to reporters, classmates, or even former teammates. The once popular athlete now walked the halls as a ghost, trying to rewrite a version of himself that didn't carry Camille Rose's shadow. Malik stayed in Decatur but kept to himself. He dropped out of most extracurriculars, stopped talking in class. A counselor was assigned to check in with him weekly. He never gave long answers. But in one session, he finally said, "I just want it to stop. I just want to be a kid again." Tyrell Owens faced his own demons. Though he hadn't touched Ethan, he had withheld information that might have saved him. He struggled with that weight. His parents pulled him out of school for a while, sent him to therapy, and kept him off the internet. It took months before he could say Ethan's name without crying. And then there were Ethan's parents. Their grief remained constant. But the trial had given them something unexpected. Clarity. In Camille's testimony, they didn't hear excuses. They heard accountability. And in the recordings Ethan left behind, they found a boy trying to do the right thing in a situation far too big for him. Mrs. Rivera started a foundation in Ethan's name, the Rivera Project, a non-profit dedicated to emotional education and safe mentorships in schools. "We lost our son to silence," she said at the launch event. "We won't let that silence continue." Camille's sentencing was quiet. No cameras, no crowds. Her husband Daniel didn't show up. He had filed for divorce shortly after her arrest and hadn't spoken to her since. The last time she heard his voice was through a voicemail where he simply said, "I hope one day you find peace." She didn't contest the divorce. There was nothing left to fight for. When she arrived at the women's correctional facility, she didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She walked in with the same quiet resignation she had carried for months. Prison to her wasn't the end. It was a kind of reckoning. In the months that followed, Camille kept a low profile. She enrolled in therapy, took part in peer discussion groups on accountability and boundaries. She volunteered in the library, tutoring other inmates who were trying to earn their GEDs. She didn't try to defend her past. She didn't try to escape it. She lived with it. Vanessa Hart, now considered a rising voice in investigative journalism, published a long-form piece 6 months after the trial titled "The Collapse of Camille Rose." The article went deeper than the courtroom. It explored systemic failures, administrative cowardice, and the emotional vulnerabilities that often go ignored, especially in women expected to be caretakers first, people second. It won her a journalism award, but it also sparked a national conversation. Other educators came forward with their own stories of emotional burnout, of unhealthy attachments, of lack of oversight and institutional support. Schools across the country re-evaluated policies. Some launched anonymous check-ins for teachers, others implemented routine mental health screenings for staff. Camille's case became a turning point, a cautionary tale, a tragedy that forced people to stop seeing misconduct as black and white and start recognizing the complicated gray. As for Decatur, it would never be the same. Ethan's name was etched into a memorial plaque outside the school library. His story became part of the curriculum in ethics classes. Students were taught not just how to recognize danger, but how to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. On the 1-year anniversary of his death, a candlelight vigil was held. Hundreds showed up. Camille's name was not spoken, but her presence lingered like smoke in the air. Unseen, uninvited, unavoidable. From behind prison walls, Camille watched a news clip of the vigil on a small TV in the common room. She pressed her palm against the screen as the candles flickered across the crowd. "I'm sorry," she whispered. No one heard her, but still, she said it, and that mattered more than anyone would ever know. There's something uniquely devastating about a tragedy that no one saw coming, especially when all the signs were there, hiding in plain sight. The story of Camille Rose is not just about a teacher who crossed every line of ethics and legality. It's about the cracks in a system designed to protect, but that too often looks away until it's too late. It's about the silence that follows uncomfortable truths and the devastating power of neglect, not just of students, but of the adults who are supposed to guide them. Camille didn't wake up one day and decide to ruin lives. Her downfall was gradual, shaped by years of loneliness, emotional neglect, and institutional complacency. But that doesn't make her actions any less harmful. Being broken is not an excuse to break others. And in her quest to feel alive again, she damaged the very lives she was meant to nurture. But the system around her failed too. Reports were ignored, patterns overlooked. No one asked how she was doing. No one stopped to wonder why a once brilliant educator had begun blurring boundaries so dangerously. And when the consequences came, they came not just for her, but for 4 young boys who were caught in the collapse. This case forces us to ask hard questions. How well do we know the people who teach our children? Who watches the watchers? And what happens when emotional wounds go untreated, not just in students but in teachers too? Camille's story is not one of innocence, but it is one of complexity. Because monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like people in pain, making choices that spiral into catastrophe. The truth is, there are no winners in this story, just loss. Ethan Rivera lost his life trying to be the voice of reason in a situation that spiraled beyond his control. Kevin and Malik lost their innocence, their reputations, and a piece of their youth they will never get back. Tyrell lost his best friend, and the belief that staying silent would keep him safe. Camille lost her identity, her career, and the version of herself she once believed was untouchable. And the town of Decatur lost its sense of security. But in the ashes of that loss came something else. Awareness, a willingness to see what had previously been ignored. Conversations began. In classrooms, in households, in school boards, conversations about consent, power, vulnerability, and mental health. Conversations that had waited too long to be spoken. Camille Rose's story is a tragedy, but if we're brave enough to learn from it, it doesn't have to be in vain. Camille Rose served 2 years of her 4-year sentence before being granted early parole for good behavior. She walked out of prison quieter, thinner, and almost unrecognizable. There were no cameras waiting, no reporters, just the dull thud of the gate closing behind her and the weight of a world that had moved on without her. She moved to a small town 2 states away under a different name, registered as required. No teaching, no contact with minors. Her days became simple. Early mornings, part-time work at a bookstore, evenings spent alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. The woman who once commanded a classroom now kept to herself, but she didn't run from her past. She lived with it. Every letter from the parole board reminded her of who she had been. Every mandatory check-in forced her to confront the damage left behind. She didn't seek forgiveness. She didn't expect redemption. She only wanted to do no more harm. Back in Decatur, the Rivera Project expanded. Ethan's mother, Carmen, became a national advocate for student safety and emotional support in schools. Her voice, once broken by grief, became a force for change. She spoke at conferences, advised districts, and helped write new policy on teacher-student boundaries across multiple states. Central High School underwent a full leadership change. New counselors were hired. Anonymous reporting tools became standard. The once hidden hallway where Camille and her students met was remodeled into a wellness center, where students could speak freely to trained professionals. Kevin Sanders earned a GED and began taking community college classes under a new name. He still doesn't speak publicly, but friends say he's working toward becoming a counselor, hoping one day to help kids like the boy he used to be. Malik Johnson found solace in therapy and eventually rejoined a local football league. His coaches say he's quiet but focused. He doesn't like to talk about what happened, but he's present. And sometimes just being present is a kind of progress. Terrell Owens returned to school with support from his family and the community. He now volunteers with the Rivera Project, speaking about the importance of speaking up, even when it's hard. His voice, once silenced by fear, is now part of the movement for accountability. Camille's name is no longer mentioned in the media. Her story lives on in classrooms, workshops, and training manuals, but her face is absent, and maybe that's the most fitting ending for a story like hers. Because it was never really about her alone. It was about what happens when silence reigns, when boundaries disappear, when pain goes unspoken for too long. And in the spaces where this story was told, change finally began to grow, quietly, deliberately, and long overdue. Now that you've heard the full story, we want to hear from you. Was justice truly served in the case of Camille Rose? Do you believe her sentence reflected the depth of the harm done or the complexity of the situation? Was she a villain, a victim, or something in between? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Share your thoughts, your theories, your feelings. We read every single one, and we know this community has powerful insights. This case isn't just about one woman or 3 students. It's about what happens when communication fails, when institutions stay silent, and when emotional needs are ignored until they become dangerous. Do you believe schools are doing enough to protect both students and teachers from these kinds of emotional entanglements? Have you ever seen a situation like this unfold in real life? What would you have done differently if you were in any of their shoes? This story might be over, but the conversations it sparks are just beginning. So comment below, and if this video made you think or made you feel, share it with someone who needs to hear it too. Someone who believes in truth, in justice, and in learning from the darkest chapters. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week we bring you a new story, true, haunting, and unforgettable. Stories that don't just entertain, they challenge us to look deeper. Because sometimes the most disturbing stories are the ones that almost happened right next door.